So, hi everybody, thank you for coming. What a great turnout. As Andre said, this is the second student discussion we've organized this year. Last one was last semester with Tony and Hilda Halawida. And we are actually considering this event, Kaleikoa's Talk of Hawaiian Consciencism, as sort of a talk for some longer term programming that we want to offer up to students. So one of the things that we've been talking about is creating a space for students who are interested in really kind of exploring a lot more deeply this idea of Hawaiian conscientism, to come together and study some really influential and important texts. And so we want to, we're doing that actually. We're going to create a study group and we want to open it up to students. It's going to be an independent, student-driven study group that's going to take a look at texts that really explore anti-oppression, liberation methods and principles and things like that. So people like Paulo Freire and Pedagogy of the Oppressed and Guki Wakiango and others like that. And so we have a sign-up sheet right over there. And we really encourage you folks, if you're feeling inspired today, to sign up on that. It'll keep you in contact with Haumana events, actions, and trainings that we want to also put together in the future. But we're going to have a couple more talks this semester, and we're also going to try and launch this study group. So if you're interested in it, go ahead and check off that you're interested in it, and we'll be sending out the details for that. But the intention of the study group is for students that, like I said, want to take a lot more deeper critical look at liberation, methods and principles, and have conversations with other students who also want to be talking about those things and how to apply it, take it out to our community, reach critical mass, meaning get the numbers and the organization that it takes to build towards real, meaningful change and change in power dynamics. So I want to really encourage folks who are interested to sign up for that. And without any further ado, we're going to get into it. And we're going to go ahead and let some of Kaleikoa's former students from MCC welcome him. And they're all students here at UH Manoa now. Mahalo.
Yo, kue manue. Ke alwakune kapule ya kalau. Kulia kalania ulia namuya nawe. Kana heiluna kana hilalo. Ka kau ka ahema kuma kani hai kalani. E kili ka ai kalani. Kau ilanui ma ke hai kalani. Ane kalani ola ke kana kai. O mai kaloya ka ike kamana ya e ka onuala. O hale wali o ka hiwai hoai ka hua o lelo. Eli kamai. A mama wano.
Mai kaino mai ko kono lipo e gali ko lipo hanno ye ko e keuni na mo i kamu e kamai ko ka ko kona ka ya ku puni ha e kukuli ya kala hui Hawaii me he puvalo me kiko ni e kupa e houlu e ola
e to hopo atani e ta maoli ola hoki o maoli ola e ola ya oi tani tu me lono oia e ola Vilina ya o kua pao mahalo ka poi no maui poi kupuna ka poi nane ho kelini ki papahana a ka poi a pao mahalo Vilina aloha.
Okay, aloha everyone. Kaleikoa Ka'el. We forgot to really introduce him, but I'm assuming most people know Kaleikoa, Hawaiian language, Hawaiian studies professor at Maui Community College.
Again, oauni o Kaleikoa, hana ia wau makamukupuni o Maui, kama wau kiki wau o ia makupuni, ko makua kani, I kiki o ia no Hamoa, no Hanioo, no Hana, no Ohana Aikau, Ohana Kealoha, Ohana Ka'eo, no ke la au o Maui. Ko o makuahine e ailiki o ia no ile lamina. Ke la moku ma Europa. No lela he hapa kanaka keia, hapa ailiki keia. He haumana wau ma ke kula kike o Baldwin. No lela, Baldwin.
Yo!
Hey, aloha. Wau ke kai he mea haumana wau ma kia kula nei, ma manoa, nui ko mahalo ko poi kumu nane ho kele. Ko wala, ko wahi heli ai, na wahi a pau i hehi ai, kau poi kumu, no iau ma, aloha kau, Laiana, ke kahi, oa, me kau poi kumu. Oi kumu hula, kumu. Kipolani kanaka ole, kanehele, Elina. Terry ke koolani. Me ipo, me kunani ni hipali. Aloha nui. Mahalo ka poi kumu. Aloha. Kind of, I say I'm very nervous, but kind of nervous. Although I get paid for talking usually. And kind of just bring this out, how they kind of came about, as Andrew was saying, you know, I really want to be kind of informal about this. I really didn't want to do a kind of lecture kind of thing and come out here and kind of espouse this kind of theory and, you know, kind of get high maki academic about what I'm trying to say. And in one way, I'm really nervous to have some of my, you know, important people that I really, not just have a lot of faith in, but I've learned so much from in my life here. And in one way, it's really nervous to see them here, but in the other way, it's also really reassuring in a sense also, because you know, I always say, as a Hawaiian, I'm the luckiest Hawaiian. I've experienced things out there. Yeah, you know, I really wish that many Hawaiians got to experience. You know, when I first came to this school, and I came in, and I entered into the Hawaiian Studies program, and I want to tell this story. I came in as a U.S. history major. And I was walking around one day, Kapesena, and I heard some young Hawaiians doing some talks. There was a couple of young professors that time, Dr. Hanani K. Trask, who had, you know, one of the greatest influences on my life, Dr. Kaleikoa Me'ilihiwa, and then a couple of young grad students, Terry Kanalu Young, and Kamahele, Momi Kamahele, and they were talking. And I heard about this Hawaiian Studies program, and I said, hey, it came on actual field Hawaiian Studies. You know, my whole life I've been studying these things and reading these things. I've always been a kind of academic geek in that kind of field. And, you know, then I realized you actually get one field of study. I didn't even know there was such a thing. The next day I walk up to at that time was called Porteous. I walk in, I see Dr. Kaleikoa Me'ilihiwa. I said, hey, how can I sign up for this program? And at that time it was a very small program. You know, I think officially 4 people were majors at that time. That summer I got to meet my other brother right there, Kaleikoa Perry, and began my journey. And I said, for me was, you know, I really found a space and a place where, you know, your whole life, you know, I said to people, you know, things happen for a reason. Your experience as a person teaches certain things. The bitterness that you experience as a child teaches you particular things. And so when I entered the program, I mean, I was all juiced up. I knew exactly where I wanted to go, and you know, and I went into that field. And it's during that period where, you know, you start to legitimize and understand, you know, all those feelings and ideas and ways of thinking were just real, but made sense, and in fact, were important. And it's also during that time where I got to experience, you know, not just real great faculty in this campus, you know, and I was, you know, one of the greatest teachers I've had, you know, Dr. Hanani K. Trask. I love that experience of we used to always like to banter and stuff, and I always loved that kind of exchange. And, you know, she was powerful, very powerful as a teacher, unafraid. And I remember watching her, and, you know, Kit Kai and stuff would be, back then, we think like the food of Islam would go with her when she'd go and do her talks and, you know, watch it. You know, and the truth was, there was a time when people used to threaten her. A lot of people don't realize that. People would actually threaten her life. And we used to think, like, we gotta watch, nobody gonna hurt her and stuff. But she would be unafraid in engaging many of those so-called minds of this campus. And you could just watch that and realize, wow, I want some of that. And it's also the same time where, I was fortunate also to be out and learning in the community. And I got to get very close with people like Kaleikoa preaching. Now, the reason I'm telling you a story, you understand where I got to this point of thinking where, so Kaleikoa preaching, who many of you may not know, he's an original of what was back then called the International Indian Treaty Council. And Kaleikoa was an original member of that. In fact, as I understand the story, from organized in 1974, and in 1977, I think was the first time they actually got to address the UN. And that was the first time ever that so-called native peoples, indigenous peoples, whatever word you want to call them, addressed the UN with the mentality of speaking on behalf or addressing these problems to the UN. And you guys know there was a Hawaiian. It was Kaleikoa. Was a Hawaiian, was the first person to represent any native people at the UN. And when you understand the story, when they used to sleep in the parks and live, do whatever it took just to be there in Geneva and those places, And unfortunately, he has passed on. And Kaleikoa, I always tell the story. I used to be in English classes, and I don't know why. He always come to the same class. He knew where I was. He'd track me down, and he'd knock on the door, and I look, and my English professor's like, who the hell is this guy? Oh, excuse me, professor, I need to borrow, Kaleikoa, I need him for some kind of project. And he would pull me out of class, and then he would take me out to lunch, for example, and I would go out to lunch, and I'd jump in his car, and I see like 2 or 3 different Indians in there at different times, and I didn't know who these guys were. So I'm having Chinese food with these, Indian people, and I kind of listen, I get to his conversations with them, and it wasn't later that I realized, people like Russell Means, these are important people in the American Indian movement that I got to meet personally. And unfortunately, he passed on. People like Sole Kihei Niheo, who was a great teacher to me. He had the sense and spirit of resistance like no other. He could be rough around the edges, that was his personality. But he would not give up. His determination was something that was always impressive. And what just to kind of add, as I'm remembering him, one of the lessons he told me one time was, Kaleikoa, you cannot feed babies steak. What the hell am I talking about, right? And what he meant was, when you teach people, when you talk to people, how Hawaiians, how you feed babies, yeah? You gotta chew a little bit in the mouth at a time. Yeah, and young babies, right, as they learn to eat, they slowly can start to eat. They start to swallow, they start. So, in the same way, when we talk to our people, and the word equal, like meat and like truth, you cannot just go and put volumes of truth on somebody at one time, because it's too much for people to process sometimes. It's too overwhelming. The truth is powerful. Sometimes it's too overwhelming. And so you just gotta keep just enough so they can take, and they go chew and nibble, and then they will like more. And so like Andre was sharing his little story, that's a kind of like mind game sometimes I would play with Andre, but the mentality was, I wanted him to come back for more. And so this was something that Soli had taught me, that when we talk to our people, a necessary thing in this whole process is the education and the raising the consciousness of our people. And how do we do that? Well, it may take that. It's going to take a little at a time. Yeah. So even if you think, or we think, and I think, I know the truth, I get the truth. So you realize, that's not going to take us where we need to go. The hardest part is taking that so-called truth you think you have and feeding it to the person next to us, the next generation, so we can all know the so-called truth. Another big life-changing part that really brought to me, and I would say the spiritual piece that I've been missing. And I remember Kai and I were involved in the Halava Valley H3 struggle when that was set to be constructed. And I remember we were up with the Kupuna up there. I think we were up there for a week at that struggle, occupation. And one of the Kupuna told, Kaleikoa, oh man, you smart, you know everything, you talk this book, but you know about faith? And I'm thinking, oh, what the hell she meant by that about faith? I couldn't, it was something I couldn't, and then I eventually I kind of realized that was, I had this knowledge in a sense, but how much did I really believe in this knowledge and stuff? And really, it was my work in Hui Malama, in Akupuna, under the leadership of Tipu and Uncle Ed. And I remember Uncle Ed telling us, hey, you guys are the practitioners. You guys are the practitioners. And if someone's going to do the job, it's going to be you guys. And I'm always going to be thankful for that opportunity because it put me on that path. And from that point on, my sense of purpose in understanding my own spiritual foundation has continued to grow. There's nothing more important and sacred that you can do is to protect our kupuna. And until you experience that, you never really can understand it. It's hard to explain that. That's the foundation. And so for me, that was a very important element in my life to understand the role that the spirit, the role that, not whatever up here will tell me right or wrong, but that part here will tell me right or wrong. And when you're around dedicated people who's given their lives to that, that's a sense of empowerment that it's priceless. And so that's just to share a little bit of, that's just a little bit of my background. And fortunate enough, as a student here also, I was at a time where, we went, when Hawaiian Studies was just beginning to be Hawaiian Studies. I was here at a time when Hawaiian language, really began to grow. I was around when Hawaiian language immersion began to find its place. And so, I've been fortunate to be around all this great stuff happening. And this is for me part of my, what drives me. When I look at, the places I've been and at situations, it's like, wow, man, 1992, Papa Kika was there too. We were at Iolani Palace. There too, when we were evicted off of the palace stairs, for Papi Kanehele and folks. I physically was able to be there with our other brother, Kanalu Young. Peace on him too. I was there when Kaho'olawe not officially returned all the way to our people, of course, but when you saw the last military helicopter leave, I was there to watch that. Eventually, when you see that occur, it's like, wow, how lucky I've been in my life. And all those experiences are something that, have been part of me. And so, when you see that, when you feel that, it's something that never leaves you. It's something that only makes you grow and grow. And the reason I'm telling you guys this is because I want you guys to look for those experiences, opportunities. The academic stuff here is good. That's part of the coding. But the experiences that you can have out there are priceless. That's the energy, that's the mana that's going to feed you to do whatever commitment you're going to be doing to stand and do whatever you need to do. A little about my family, as I shared. My dad, very quiet, humble Hawaiian, born in Hana, family from Hamua, Hani'o'o. My mom, kind of a loud Irish lady, raised in Liverpool. And so, fortunately, I kind of walk in two worlds too. They're very politically active, very politically conscious, and so I was fortunate also to be, around it also. My other half, some of you guys know, of course, Kahele, who, really is the ringmaster at the house. She's the boss in charge. But she also is a product of this school. She also comes from a very strong parent, so very committed to their lifestyle. Her mother, makes kapa and very great artist. Her father, some of you guys know Alaba, is a character of his own, but very committed to what he does. And then I have 3 children. The eldest, who is a junior now, but she started off her schooling when Kaheli was teaching actually at Nui, Hawaiian Immersion School in Nui, and we started the first daycare, from Pampers up to 4 or 5 years old preschooling program, Malia Nui, and so she started in that program. And up until we moved back to Maui when she was 4 and 5 years old, and actually went into the Punana Leo. That's when she actually first speak English and stuff. But here, unfortunately, the teachers that we had here, we had a couple of Nihao people themselves actually were teaching. So the point I'm trying to say, when you experience that kind of stuff with your child, and you look at the legacy, here's my grandmother, who, as I understand, she died when I was very young. Really only spoke Hawaiian. In fact, her English was kind of on the, she didn't like to speak English because she was kind of shy about it. To my dad, it was a total opposite. Yeah, quasi-English, as I always tease him. Yeah. Hawaii Standard English. And then to me, which I, going back to school and learning Hawaiian, and then here's my own daughter, starting back again. So to experience that kind of process also is something that is important. Then my number 2 daughter and my son were both born on Maui, and very much the same way. And then when I look at my children, especially my son, and I was telling somebody else about earlier, the so-called consciousness, and I'll get into that too. Here's my son, a typical Hawaiian boy, but when he wants to be Halloween, my son is, I'm going to be Kaleikoa. The next year, I'm going to become a Pua'a. See, for me, when I see that kind of stuff, it's like, oh, can hope. Can hope. My story, I'm sharing this because my story is not like your guys' story. That's the point I say. Never think you too far not to do what you need to do or what. We all are on this path. My boy, for some, he likes to wear malos. You go up Kakaloa, you go see him running around a malo up here. He thinks it's cool. Yeah. He and his best friend, who's also from Hawaiian Immersion, that's what they do. We have Waiahuli homesteads up in Kula, and they may be playing outside doing malos and throwing spears and doing whatever. And I get a call from a neighbor, hey, the boy guys, it look like they're trying to throw spears at the cars and that kind of stuff. And, So for them, it's so natural. Last year, my boys, Dad, how come you don't let me dance hula? I like dance hula. And the problem for me is that, I don't take you. That's the whole problem. But, I look at my dad's generation. Think about that. What was hula like to them? My generation, I dance, but I'll be always kind of, because it's, again, this is part of our damage. Right? You damage. My son's generation, I know. My dad's generation, being Hawaiian, was seen as a negative. Something you was trying to erase. Physically they couldn't, or sometimes they would try. But inside was something that they were forced to erase for many of them. My generation, yeah, we Hawaiian, I don't really know exactly what that may be, but we Hawaiian, and I was hungry. Everybody was happy. Right on, Kaleikoa charge. We're so happy. Right? My son's generation, it's not even a question. See, they're Hawaiian, and they're going to be Hawaiian wherever they go, wherever they're going to be in the future. So part of this, my point is, just understand, part of this is part of what I'm trying to get into today. This journey is that we are on this journey. We are on this journey, and it's all possible. We're living in a terrific time. We live in a terrific time because we are being reborn. We are reestablishing, reinvigorating, reliving, all those rewords. That's what's going on right now with our people. But we also have to be very aware that there are traps in this also. And that's kind of what I want to get into also. And that's a little bit about my background and myself. And currently today I work at the University of Hawaii College, in the Hawaiian Studies and Hawaiian Language Department. I like to teach. You know, I'm one of those guys who I get bored very fast, and so every semester I usually have some kind of special topic class. And what happened last year, I wouldn't touch my heart thinking about this, but I happened to have a conversation with Kanalu Young a while back, Dr. Terry Young, and we were talking about a class that, again talking to Kit Kai, my brother Kit Kai, we had taken from Haunani K-Tress. That was called decolonization back then. It was a seminar class. The first time was kind of taught, and really was the first way we could put words to ideas and this kind of understanding of things in a matter, so we could really express ourselves in a good way. And so, talking with Kanalu, we wanted to kind of, I don't say update that class, but we didn't really like the idea of decolonization because it's that word "de" means it's an opposition to it. So it was as if again being reactive to something. And so we were trying to think of ideas of this is a while back of how would we say it in our way. And we looked at some Hawaiian ideas. For me, I've always liked to use the word ho'ona'awao or na'awao. Very simple word. And I know people think of it as being like, to be educated. But for me, it's a lot deeper than that. And I kind of go back to some of the kupuna that I had some discussions with, at Mama Ale, who used to work and teach at us in this campus, about the meaning of na'au and na'awao and na'aupo. And when we talk about decolonization, colonization, and for me, I was thinking of to be colonized, and I'm using the word colonized not in a political sense from the UN, Article 73, that kind of meaning of colonization. Yeah, I'm talking about the phenomena sense of colonization, where basically, put in simple terms, when an outside force or settler country basically abuses you, transforms you, does all those kinds of nasty things to you, so they can benefit off of you and your resources. And the biggest process of that is basically to train you to become complicit in that process. That's the point. So at some point you realize and you accept that position. So that's how I'm using that. And to me, the word was just na'aupo. That's that na'au. And in Hawaiian thinking, the na'au for us is the most, and that's the spiritual base. That is the most important piece of our body. It's not the mind between the two ears. It's here. Right? When we do wrong, how we know we do wrong? Yeah? You feel them in your stomach. You get happy, you do something good, you feel them here. You fall in love, you feel them here. You get excited, you get nervous, the seat of ourselves are here. So that na'au to me, that's that connection, that's that spiritual connection to who we are as a people. Po, of course, meaning that, darkness has set in, or being the opposite of na'awao. Yeah, so in English they may use the word enlightened or educated. But for me, I always say, na'awao. When I look at culture, for example, I like to use the word na'awao. I really don't like to use the word mo'omeheo. And I'm not being offended, I hope not being offended to anybody who uses the word mo'omeheo, but na'awao to me is like, culturally, you're not going to do stupid things. So, anything you do culturally must be of intelligence. That is our intelligence. Our intelligence isn't just adding 2 + 2 = 4. Our intelligence is how I will treat the brother next to me with compassion. That is the na'awao also. So to me, when we think of the word na'awao, for me, it has that kind of deeper meaning than just to be educated. But it's also, how do I treat another person as a human in our way? So the idea of na'awao for me was, again, talking with Kanalu Young, and they were looking at all these other words, and they were thinking, if we really think about it, our kupuna never really dealt with this question too. So in a way, even if we put a real Hawaiian word to this, it's not going to be really a real Hawaiian concept, because our people were never damaged in this way also. Well, in discussions with him, I had shared with him that I had just read a book entitled Conscientism. Conscientism by Kwame Nkrumah, who was an important leader for Ghana and the setting up Ghana and their decolonization in the 1960s. And it's a very small book, and you can find it around. It's very technical, philosophical kind of stuff. But it's the kind of book you read through, and if you don't understand, you just kind of read through it, and you're going to see a couple of sentences that really make sense, and you continue on. But he makes it very clear. It's called Conscientism and Ideology, Philosophy and Ideology for Decolonization. And so me, I always like that idea, philosophy and ideology for decolonization. Now, of course, the Ghana situation is different from us. But I just love that idea. Because the first thing I thought is, well, what is our philosophy and ideology? What is it? You know, so I then started to think about our own ideas about it. And then I had read other great writers, as was mentioned before, Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. You all should have read that book. Even if you're not in education in any field, you should actually read that book. And so important things about that book is he talks about this concept of conscientization. But he actually uses the Portuguese word for that meaning. And it's basically the process of raising consciousness of the people. And he's talking mainly about the so-called oppressed, right? How to raise the consciousness of the oppressed. And the first tenet that he basically pushes them, the oppressed are a lot smarter than what you may think. You know, it's not like you, as they say, it's not like you're trying to put information into an empty bowl, that in fact, the consciousness of the oppressed is already there. You as a teacher, your role really is trying to bring that out from them. Yeah, so you're not trying to, if you think about it, you're not trying to put something in there as much. In fact, you get the word for education, educe, which basically means to bring out from. That's really what it's about. And then one of my other favorite writers who has a book, I Write What I Like, that's Stephen Biko, who is a famous South African revolutionary who was a pretty young student when he lost his life in the struggle in South Africa against apartheid. He was so dangerous, they did not just lock him up, he was killed. And in his book entitled I Write What I Like, there's a chapter called Black Consciousness. And they have other important writers out there and speakers. Amos Wilson is also an African-American writer who has a couple of books, one entitled The Falsification of African Consciousness and African-Centered Consciousness Raising, I forget the title. So as you can see, there's a lot of different people, right? I'm sure some of the people I want to mention. Vine Deloria, I'm not going to go through that. Vine Deloria and his look. Even the title of his book, God is Red. Whoa, what does that mean? God is red. Why do I think God is white? You see, I can go back to the idea. See, that's consciousness. People like Winona LaDuke, and one of my favorite books, and I would say you should all read the book, especially those involved in struggle, is by autobiography of Assata Shakur. Now, Assata Shakur, just to kind of give up, she used to be she rose from the ranks into the leadership of what was back then called the Black Panther Party. And in the early 1970s, the Black Panther Party basically got destroyed by the COINTELPRO program from the FBI. And she went underground. And she became the head of what became the Black Liberation Army. Real radical, but super duper smart. She was so radical, she was locked in solitary confinement. She was so tough.
Get people out in the hallway. Wait right on the side.
Bring it up,
You guys come inside. Get room on the mats. Still get room. Get chairs.
By me, you're like,
Yeah.
But the thing with Assata,
Come inside. Get chairs up here in front.
she was so dangerous, but she was so much loved that they broke her out of prison, and she currently lives in Cuba to this day. But she has a book called Assata. her autobiography. Now, what's so important about that? She talks about her own personal experiences, the political struggle, and raising consciousness, the day-to-day details. And the biggest lesson I remember reading from her was, she said, one of her failures is that while in the Black Panther Party, when she saw contradictions with the leadership, and she saw something wasn't correct, and they were doing things that perhaps wasn't right, she was afraid of saying something. And so she never said nothing. And she looked back and she realized, by her not saying something, that's what helped to destroy the whole party. And she said, a true leader will never be afraid of being confronted about, especially theories about actions. Because a true leader realizes it's not about them, it's about the whole. For me, that was an important lesson. And that's one thing for me, start to realize who are so-called leaders in our own community. Sometimes people, they may not be happy in the questions that I ask, but if I'm going to be true to what I've learned from people like Asaka, sometimes I need to ask those kinds of questions, or to confront. At the same time, I also have to myself to understand that I gotta be able to respond or not be offended when someone asks you a particular question. See, the big danger is when you become godlike, damaging. You're not gonna point fingers to people like, but that becomes very damaging. We should always hold our leaders, or so-called leaders, accountable. Another person that and he was here earlier, some of you guys saw, Dr. Grant Smith from Aotearoa. And I went to a presentation probably about 7 years ago, and he was talking about his Kuda Kaupapa and his work in the Maori immersion program in schools. And he used the word conscientization also. Quoting from fear, but he used it, and he said, I'm using this word because I don't like to use the word decolonization. I like to use this word in the sense of a purposeful plan, a program of dealing with whatever we need to do with in our terms. And I went and said, wow, yeah. And to make a long story short, I kind of put all this together. And so when I taught the class last year, I eventually decided to title that class Hawaiian CONSCIENCISM. And from the very beginning, as I'm saying now, I cannot really give you a definition. And in fact, I kind of resist, and I don't really want to give you a definition because I don't really have the answer. But I bet you all of us together can get the answer together. Holy smokes! Of course. Now I really get some out of pressure with people there. Which, of course, a couple of most influential books for my life. Of course, Decolonizing the Mind, which, mahalo to you, has been a cornerstone for the so-called reawakening of our people, whether it's through language or literature. And my personal favorite actually is Moving the Center, which I think for me really speaks to this what I'm trying to say here. Moving the center. We are here. Well, if I was on Maui, I would probably say, Maui is in the center of the Hawaiian Islands, center of the Pacific, center of the world, center of the galaxy, center of the universe. But when you start to put yourself in the center, that means your history is at the center. It means your language is at the center. It means your spirituality is at the center. It means when you're talking economics or politics, you're talking from the center. Not from what lens coming from the outside inwards. And so to me, that's basically the core of this understanding. And so I did this course. Actually, the reading in that class was from Moving the Center. It was one of the books I actually read. And there are many great minds out there. So the way I looked at it was, I started by looking at some of the Hawaiian voices that I think were very important of the past. The first one for me that I used in class was John Dominus Holt's work. Being Hawaiian, which early on was at a time when Hawaiians kind of still were in this kind of darkness and shadows of being Hawaiian. And it's a very short and important book that you should, again, we got to understand how we got to the point we got here. And we can never judge the past on the conditions of today. Yeah? Today, it's easy to run around and say, I'm a Hawaiian studies person, I study Hawaiian. In his time, it wasn't. Yeah. And then you look at, many of the other great minds, to me, which, Dr. Haunaniki Trask and others who started off by looking at, and then I looked at some Pacific writers, Dana Avatere and I forget my brain, too much stuff in the head sometimes. So, and then and I slowly tried to, and the basis for me was, let's go look at people, not start with Hawaiian as a center, but let's go look at how other people deal with this so-called question. Let's be as informed as possible. And I don't have the exact Gandhi, quote, but Mahatma Gandhi has a quote in a sense that says something like, I will take all cultures to come and blow in my household. All cultures and knowledges should come in my household, but I will never allow that knowledge to make me a pauper or make me a beggar in my own household. So to me, that's important. We should welcome all knowledge from anywhere. We can learn from everybody, anybody out there. And I'm a big believer, and part of my views also is that if you really were to study so-called the Hawaiian reawakening, renaissance, political struggle, movement, whatever you want to call it, every time we've got involved with situations or questions outside of Hawaii, those things were brought into Hawaii and made us actually stronger in dealing with the situations here. Yeah, so we should never be afraid of dealing with those things outside of Hawaii, because if there are questions dealing with humanity, we're all humans. Those questions out there can have a very positive effect in here. Yeah, and I know, because and the reason I'm saying it, because I've come across Hawaiians, other Hawaiians, like, Kaleikoa, you shouldn't read Gramsci. Why not? You're pretty smart if you understand his idea of hegemony, and you understand the way hegemony works, how the so-called outside and settler and oppressor works on us. The number one thing is that we become complicit in that oppression. That's how it works. Stephen Biko, again, my favorite quote, and you guys heard it many, many times from me, the greatest weapon of the oppressor are the minds of the oppressed. Think about that. The greatest weapon of the oppressor is not what the oppressor has, it's what the oppressor has done to us, how we internalize it, and how we become complicit in that. It's how we manage and control our own selves in that question. What does it tell me? Well, to solve that situation, it's on who? It's on us. If the greatest weapon of the oppressor are the minds of the oppressed, the opposite therefore is true. The greatest weapon to relieve this so-called oppression is the redevelopment of our own minds. Hence the idea of conscientism. So dealing with that question, what are those questions? And for me, that's what they are. I'm not necessarily saying, what are the questions are we asking? What are these questions? What are these questions? So when I look at the idea of conscientism, I'd say one of the things I liked about Kwame Nkrumah's idea of conscientism is I like the word ism also, because it's not just a single act or a single event, but ism has a sense of, you're talking process and you're talking about power. What is the process to power? How do we reclaim power for ourselves in these lands? What are the principles? What are the principles? What are our own principles as a people? What are our own principles as a people? What is our ideology? First of all, of course, we should start by looking, as they say, we need to understand the past to understand where we are today, so we can make the best decisions of where we're going to go. This so-called idea of conscientism to me is the sense of remembering and recalling Yeah? So we can concentrate today and analyze today, because the main purpose is for us, for our children to dream of the tomorrow. You cannot dream tomorrow, or you probably can dream, might end up with a nightmare, of course. But if you dream lacking a clear sense of your past, or a demented, confused sense of today, you know, your dream perhaps may be something not too positive. So, understanding your history, you know, as the great Malcolm X said, you know, a people without a history is demoted to the lower animals. And how do you treat lower animals? How do you think of lower animals? Well, they don't get educated, they get trained. So understanding our history is a key element in all of this. Now, thankful today, wow, we get some terrific, you know, we get terrific historians. You know, I always say, you know, to be one of the greatest historians of a generation, Dr. Keanu Sai, old friend of mine. You know, he was running around with us 20 years ago here also. And I have some great memories and discussions with him. And that historical information is something that is so empowering to me. For me, it's such an important facet of conscientism. For example, let me give you an example. When you use words like, I'm a Native American, or I'm a Native Hawaiian, think of how that context defines you. When you say, I'm a Hawaiian national, or I'm a Maka'ainana, what does that say about you? Yeah. When you say, you know, when I use the word, for example, like occupation, how does that change the situation? It changes big time. Because 20 years ago, see, I used to use the word all the time. We're occupied people. I never know what the hell I was talking about, really. Sounded good. I heard other people out there use that word. I never fully understand. But today, now I understand more. Oh, that ammunition is that much more deeper and stronger. And so how we define, and that's the word define I like to put in there also. Amos Wilson has a word he says where the power to define, you know, is really where it's at. It's really about the power who gets to define. Right? If you have power to define, you therefore have dominion over that. So power, definition, and dominion, they all go hand in hand. When we allow others to define for us, they have dominion over us. That simply. You are a Native Hawaiian, Native American, such and such. And if we allow that defining, we allow that dominion over us. But if we start to redefine for ourselves for today, yeah, informed by the past, but for us today, how we define ourselves today also provides us with we making claim to our own dominion of who we are. An example I always use. When we look at land in Hawaii, commonly people will talk about, you know, my property in Hawaii Kai. Property. What does that mean? Real estate. What does that mean? Yeah, obviously, culturally, we understand that's not a Hawaiian cultural view of land. And the Hawaiian word aina, of course, doesn't mean real estate. They're incompatible. If we use just by using the word aina, understanding the idea of aina, that which feeds us, already we are claiming we are in a counter-hegemonic mode to those who want us to continue to see. And my point is, this is how simple it can be. Think about this. If 2,000 students on this campus started to use the word aina, or 10,000 people on this island started to use the word aina, or starting to use the word occupation, or starting to use the word lahui kanaka, what have you, the consciousness will change. Yeah, as Kwame Ture said, power starts at the consciousness. When the idea is spoken, power has already started. You know, and that idea, you know, the hardest step is the first step, very much in the same way. Because once a word is spoken and others start to speak that word, it starts to change the mentality. Again, who defines has dominion. The opposite is true. If we allow others to continually define for us and speak for us, yeah, another case in point. Yeah. Today, I hope the lesson would be, anytime you hear somebody use the word ceded lands, you should not take it quietly. You should not allow that person to use that words without challenging them on where that meaning of the word has come from. And we all should know the word ceded lands, of course, came from the so-called ceding from the so-called provisional government, what becomes the territory of Hawaii. That never came from us. That's the national lands of our people, of the Hawaiian Kingdom. Yeah, these are lands, in fact, that have been, I don't want to use the word stolen either.
Pirated.
Pirate is a good word. But see, when you use the word stolen, see, as you know, obviously, you know, you cannot steal land. The land is still there. See, that's the danger. When they stole our land. See, it's like somehow got transferred out. No, the lands are still there. You cannot steal something that's always here. But your mind can be believed, it can be faked into them. So, if we were to look at somewhere our Olelo no Iao as a starting point, yeah, he alika aina he kaua ke kanaka. He alika aina he kaua ke kanaka. Land is the ali'i. We are the kanaka, the servants. That's very different from the property value of my real estate is, it's a very different language. But that consciousness changes how we look at the land. The land isn't something that we should just look at as being merely by the value of it monetarily, but something that we have a spiritual relationship to. Now that's something that comes from our kupuna. That's something that we still kind of have, but that's something we gotta promote even more strongly. And the word I was telling Andre, be obscenely truthful. I mean, we need to be truthful all the time. Not some of the time, all the time. Another important Olelo no Iao for me, and especially for those involved, and we all should be involved in the struggle in some way. You know, whatever way you want to call the so-called struggles. Even struggle is a kind of negative word I don't like. Is that, first of all, is that we are all involved whether you like it or not. Whether you participate or not, you involve. And by your non-participation, you involve in supporting the so-called other side, which is harming us. So by you, in fact, just standing still, you are allowing those people who oppress us to do the things that they do. Now, the misinformation, of course, is I hear all the time, ones go, no, I'm not a political person, I'm a culture person. Or I'm a political person, I'm not a cultural person. Or culture person, And I would say, they wanted the same thing. They're two sides of the same coin. You cannot be one good taro farmer today if you know more water. You can know everything about taro, but if you know more water, and you're not involved in the politics to make sure you get good water, well, your taro farming ain't going to be around for too much longer. Or on the other end, right? You can have all the political power to get all the water you like. But unless you maintain and process and learn how to aloha aina from malama aina, you fall short also. All the things we need to do culturally depends on our consciousness politically. They go hand in hand. Now, part of this, I think it's a game, but part of the process of fooling us, of course, is that. So whenever I hear Hawaiians say, I don't get any politics, I just do this cultural stuff. The first question I said, well, how are you really doing the cultural stuff? Perhaps you think you're doing something important culturally, maybe you're not. And so I asked them those kinds of questions to try to get them to kind of think about it. Because many times, this is part of our training to think this way. Many of our people have been trained to believe somehow that, Hawaiians don't protest. I hear that all the time. Oh, Kaleikoa, our style as Hawaiians, we never protested. And the first thing I say, you obviously don't know your history. You know what happened in 1897? In fact, I'll give you a story. Once I did a talk at Iolani Palace at some, I don't know, Sovereign Sunday or some event, and I did a talk, and I basically decided I would do just in Hawaiian. So I did my whole 10-minute talk just in Hawaiian. And a newspaper guy came up to me and asked me, what were you talking about and why did you do it? So I explained to him, I said, well, the truth is that our political speeches were done here at this place, in Hawaii. And I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that not that it was just done there, but in fact it will be done more and more often in the now. Anyway, with a long story short, the next day the paper come out and a news person had gone off to go interview a Hawaiian language teacher up at some infamous campus who told the reporter, Hawaiians should never use their language in a political manner. It's embarrassing. And I told myself, how sad. How sad that person would think that way. How sad that person had never read the great speeches of people like Navahi, Kalaukalani, some of the greatest statesmen you could ever read. And the truth is, we did. And we protested in our own way. By the thousands. This is part of the history. Like I said, history informs us of what we need to do today. But if I did not know that history, I may have said, oh yeah, that guy, he right there. See, that's why it's so important. We, the so-called, those who have institutions like the University of Hawaii, so-called educated Hawaiians, that's our importance of our role. Education isn't just for us. Our education is for our masses of our people. Let me just stop there to say, we also got to realize, is an educated Hawaiian a good thing? If I ask the question, educated Hawaiian, good? Oh, you know what? This is the point. Think critically. When I say education of Hawaiians is a must, the question I would first ask is, what do you mean by education? Educated in what? For whom? To be a civil engineer so they can go create some new bombs to go drop in some foreign land? I'd rather be Hawaiian educated. That's very different. Because I asked the question, who is doing the educating and for what purpose? Education isn't just education, there's always a purpose to an education. And while I'm on the subject, I might as well pick up my blue and white friends. So, I'm not trying to be mean, but a few years back, I think Andrew remember I did the talk about Olsen. What's Olsen? How many of you guys know who Olsen was? Raise your hands. There we go. Olsen was the first headmaster of the Kamehameha schools. Okay. Olsen had been a headmaster at a couple other places at UHC, and and a Hilo boarding school. Hilo boarding school. Hilo boarding school. He's the first headmaster. Kaleikoa spoke at the first, convocation or whatever they call it back then. Spoke entirely in Hawaiian. Remember this though. The blue and white, so remember this. As Skippy would call it, the blue and white mafia. Olsen
was so ashamed and appalled that Hawaiian would be spoken there. That's why Hawaiian was banned off that campus. See, when I meet young Hawaiians go, well, you see, the princess's legacy, what she wanted to do was learn English. I said, no. Read what it says in the will. The primary language will be English, not the only language. Check it out for yourselves. Olsen decided that it shouldn't be used anymore. He who was offended. So if you wonder why Hawaiian isn't mandatory in that school, it started from somebody named Olsen. And that legacy had lived on. And the sad point, it still lives on.
Forget the song too.
Okay. Oh, we go. That's right. We rolling now. We should sing our favorite blue and white song. Right? Ray, 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 whatever. How does it go? Come on. Don't be shy. Sing it out loud. And you should remember, every time you sing that song, it was written by Olsen. Was Olsen. He wrote that song. Still sung to this day, very proudly. But who the hell was Olsen? How many of you guys know Olsen was part of those who ended up locking up the queen? He was part of the overthrow. He was responsible for locking up the queen in Iolani Palace. How many of you guys know when that was done, many of the Kamehameha students themselves left the school in protest? So, and my dream is one day some graduates will go and say, we need to change the song. We should not accept the fact that somebody in Olsen had that much influence. And the opposite is, Charles Reed Bishop. Right? See, a lot of people realize that princess, Hawaii, she passed on before the school even started. Her husband, Charles Reed Bishop, right, began the school. But you guys know he was also part of the pro-annexationist group? That's right. That's the legacy. That's the legacy I leave up to the so-called blue and whites to go and figure out. Now, why is it important to me? It's important to me because that's part of the legacy. That's part of the legacy of when you don't tell the truth, when you hide the history, it's done for a purpose. And the purpose was to transform our people who in 1897, 40,000 of our people got together in unity to state we did not want to be part of the United States, affirmed that with written signatures, in a matter of decades, that knowledge and identity was wiped clean from our minds. So by the time I went to school, we had no knowledge that in fact our people, Hawaiians, unity, unified? Hell yeah. And institutions like Kamehameha, under control of people like Olsen, purposely decided in the program to make zombies out of our people, to put us to sleep. And if you were to read other documents in the educational system in the Hawaiian Islands, you basically find that there was a purposely effort to destroy our minds, to make us again become sleep-like walking animals like zombies. So we don't know our own history. So we quickly and easily led to be complicit in the process of the so-called colonization. Another important I was kind of getting to, I apologize, I'm kind of off on that one, but I always have fun speaking on the blue and white, so it's kind of how Baldur let me just kind of add one more story again. I had a student once, I taught summer school, who was a valedictorian from Kamehameha. And she was at Columbia getting her degree. She came to do summer school. And one day after class, she came up totally crying to me and said, I'm at Columbia. I come home. And she's like, I never knew all of this stuff. I'm a lifer up there. And she said, not that I never know this stuff, but I was taught not to care about this stuff. And I told her, hey, that's good, but
since you're already at Columbia, you might as well get your degree there first. But you better come home. And I told her, you see, the worst thing about the mentality up at that school there, not to be shy about it, is this idea that to progress, you go on to get your degree out there somewhere in the great world, get a nice paying job, and somehow you're successful. That's the greatest brain drain you'll ever see. Success is when our people get trained and come back and work for our lahui. That's success. But to teach our people that success is out there, see, that's to me, that's part of the problem. That's the kind of things that we need to change. Now, I'm not saying that there are good people out there who are changing it, but that's the kind of thing we need as a people to have an uprising to push to change. Okay, let me get to my next. And this actually occurred during the when we were dealing with the Kauai High Caves, and Haleloha Ayao was taken to jail, and then he had the monitor on his leg, and we were going through this so-called ho'oponopono process. And one of the leaders of the Ho'oponopono is Uncle Earl Kawa'a. Kind of mahalo him. One of the most beautiful men, gentle Hawaii, proud and strong. And he had a dream, and he kind of was sharing his talk, and he said, he broke out this ololano iao that I've always known, but it's, like I said, you may know something, but you don't really know it until you see it in context. And he said, "Iali'i no kiali'i ike kanaka. Iali'i no kiali'i ike kanaka," which is an ali'i becomes an ali'i, or is the ali'i, because of the people. Or it's the people that make an ali'i the ali'i. And for me, it was like, bingo, right on the head. Whoa! You see, the language we get taught to all the time. Hawaiians, you need some leaders out there. Who's your leaders? Stand up, your leaders. Right? There's this mentality of leadership. And the bingo for me was, you see, that's such a haole mentality. What do our people say? Is to serve. What we need is people who are willing to serve our people. We don't lead in the front and you guys follow me and let's go. The political leadership comes from the service of the people. So what does it tell us in our daily activities? And I tell my students, I don't want you guys to become leaders. I want you guys to become service people of our people. I want you to dedicate yourself to the service of our lahui. That's what I want. Because that's the Hawaiian idea of political leadership. It's from the doing. So we have all our own, my point is, we have all our own olelo no iao that we can all look at, investigate, and throw into this pot of Hawaiian conscientism. But we also have some other, I say other, knowledges that I just, as you can see, the way I take notes, I just write any kind of stuff down. But to me, this is life and death. Hawaii issues or conscientism to me is life and death. For our lahui out there, as you may not know, we suffer from the worst health statistics, the highest suicide rates, the highest rates of imprisonment, the highest rates of violence, physical abuse, sexual abuse. And it's been going on for generations. Kwame Ture, or Stokely Carmichael in his past, he came here in the mid-90s. One of the greatest talks I ever got to witness, I was right in the front seat, he did his talk. Kwame Ture is a long history and struggle from with SNCC and in the South, and voting rights to the Black Panthers and African, actually the Pan-African movement and so forth. But he came here to talk. And he did a talk here, and there's a couple of things he said there to me that, again, there are moments that just, when you blow your mind and you go like, whoa! And some of the things he said to me, which really made it clear, was this. You can never, or you should never, analyze the oppressed without also including the role of oppression or the role of the oppressor in that process. Because if you do and you fail to include them, you end up blaming the oppressed for the situation and conditions. And then when you try to solve those situation conditions, you'll always come up short. See, the point I'm trying to say, the reason we're in this condition, because we are dominated people.
Real quick,
Yeah.
along those lines, oftentimes I was just having a discussion about how we sometimes our lahui gets criticized, and sometimes we even buy into it. How the reason we're not moving anywhere, we're not getting sovereignty, we're not winning, because we cannot come together, we're not unified. And I think it kind of plays into that mindset of that somehow we have to be unified in our politics, without any contrast or analysis on other politics around the world are never unified. America's not unified. And they haven't even worked out their budget for their country yet because of this unification. But I just want to make that point.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's my point. So, for example, you look at health statistics, and I sat in panels and talked about this before with educators and stuff, and they get new reading programs and this and that, and I say, those things are important, but I think you might be looking at the wrong, guidebook here. Because unless you include the conditions that create that situation, you have a false analysis of what's really going on. We gotta treat our people because we are a dominated people. And in other words, to relieve their conditions, it means we have to challenge their domination. It means we have to get involved in changing the conditions which create those results. Because if you're only going to deal with the results, you're really just spinning the wheel. Now, I say this because I've come across many people in leadership positions who are kind of afraid. So, this is high-ranking so-called educators, but, they don't want to mention, I don't want to talk about colonization, I don't want to talk, because somehow they believe, one, either they're fearful to talk about it, or two, they think it doesn't have nothing to do with the situation. For me, in my analysis, it plays the most important factor in that situation. Yeah, so it's something that we gotta always include. Yeah, so if you, and I share this because many of you may be working in different fields, some of you in education, some of you in health, wherever you be working. And we have to include in that question. We have to constantly make clear, that what we are doing here is not like anybody else. Our purpose is very different. And to quote, one of our great brothers, I think to me, that's the real philosopher, that's the real thinker. A great singer himself, that's Brother Skippy Iwane. If you never listened to Skippy Iwane before, you all should. But he has a line in his song, them got democracy, we got survive. And a very simple level, you might be thinking, what the hell is that? But if you really understand political narrative, that's exactly, see, we're talking two different things here. The guy from Wisconsin that moved over here who comes to Hawaii will say, well, I don't see nothing wrong here. You have right to participate in vote and this, and you have Democrat. We're coming from a totally different view of what's going on in Hawaii. For our people, we're talking survival. We're talking about the revival of our people in this place. So we're not talking the same political jargon. We're not coming from the same political narrative. In fact, this political narrative is at head with one another. And once you understand that, we understand that the solution to this problem will not come from Washington, D.C. It's going to come from here. Another thing that Kwame Ture also said on that talk was this: the answer to your problems, the answer to this struggle can only come from your culture. I repeat, the answer can only come from your culture. And that's why the role of language is so important. Because if we enter into this discussion politically, talking about real estate, talking about, $200 million of value of land, we already lost the battle. Because once we talk in that language, we already caught up in that trap. That language is a language that empowers them. $200 million of, you can see who I'm pointing the fingers at. Kaka'ako, 200 million, you could have easily bought half the island of Molokai probably for a few million. You could have bought a lot of water lands out there. But the purpose was never to feed our people. The purpose was to play this kind of game like, oh, we're going to play investors like them too. We're going to be like them. And if we be like them, all right, we're going to be successful. But the reality for me, of course, like I say, if we could survive, if we as a people would survive 10 generations, 20 generations, I don't care how many billions of dollars we get in a bank, that money will never make us survive. If we could survive, we're going to have to live upon the aina. Not sit as board chairmen and having a stipend check. Kupuna said, Kupuna gave us this wisdom. Aole mako a eminamina, ikapuukala o ke aupuni. What does it mean? Yeah, no, look at the money. It's not talking sums of money. That's taking us off track. Walava mako ikapohaku, ika ay kamaha o kaaina. How we will live and survive? This lepomomona, this land. We get the land. Even if we don't want money, we're going to survive. Aole mako ae. Let's try to get the next day. Pulima. The pulima. Ohui aina ku aiheva. What I'm trying to make is that, a lot of these kind of people get like, oh, as Hawaiians, I don't know what we should do. I'm like, hey, easy. Start by looking what went on in the past. Start by looking at those lessons that our kupuna left for us. Start there. Now, I'm not saying, so you gotta be careful too. Sometimes in survival, when you're in survival mode, you gotta do what you do to survive. That's true. But that's a tactic. That's not what you're looking for. See, there's a difference in saying, this is what I want, and this is what I'm going to take now because I need to survive. See, I know also, our kupuna also had a famous saying, A'oiki kawa. What's the next line? A'oiki holo. You're going to do battle, first thing you better learn is when to run. It's survival, to fight another day. So I also understand that. If it's a tactic, I understand that. But that's not what I hear. You see, that's the point I'm trying to make. You understand the difference between tactic and so even the question of, Kaleikoa, why not just be Native Americans? Is that what we want? Is that what we ever been? I never said any kupuna call himself Native American. Not once. If we're native to the Pacific. Not once I've ever read that. But is that what we, what is that we want? That's the conception, that's the ideology, that's the philosophy. If that's not what we want, that may be a tactic, if that's a tactic, if that's survival. But as a goal, no way, Jose. Yeah. We gotta be a lot more akamai, I think, as an example in politics. Now, unfortunately, a lot of times when we get involved in political discussions, I come now bring up this statement over and over, and many times, the first reaction I get from people many times is that almost like scared, because they realize that I don't want to say I'm right, but the kupuna were right. And so, when you have to self-evaluate your person, that's also a process. And that's a hard thing to do. But the point I want to get to is that we all have to self-evaluate. Nobody here has the answer. Nobody here is there. But all of us together get the answer. You know, our kupuna was so genius. I mean, one of the things I remember I learned from Mama Holly was, you know, Kaleikoa. I remember one time we were watching, and these Hawaiians are fighting. The Hawaiians is fighting. She goes, you see, Kaleikoa, Kamaika boy. You see, tell me, we see our people. That's how smart they are. And look at her, she goes, yeah, you see, we're so smart. We all think differently. That's good. And I really understood what she was saying. You know, one of the intelligences of our people is that we're not like sheep. We think differently. Why? Well, let's understand the environment. So this is part of our conscientism we understand. When you look at Hawaii, it's very different from other parts of the world. Yeah, if you guys go visit natives in other lands, for example, if you were to go visit the Lakota, I'm not talking bad about the Lakota, but if you went there, what are you going to see? What's the landscape? Just grass. Grass, fields of grass, that's it. So, culturally, they're very adapted to just grass. So culturally, they're very similar because what they do in this family, pretty much the same as what they're going to do in that family, is very similar. While in Hawaii, what kind of landscapes we get in Hawaii? Physically. There's no place like Hawaii. You can be at the top of a rainforest, few miles down the line, you can be on dryland forest, you can be on sandy beach, you can be on rock coastline in a matter of miles. The diversity of this landscape made it so that our kupuna, when we adapted our culture to this landscape, we had to be diverse. And that diversity is our strength. So as I tell people, that's why we're so different. That's because in our kupuna, they have to learn how to be in the ocean, they be up mountain, they be on cliff. I mean, their diversity of knowledge really is what we adapted to, and that's our strength as a people. And then to understand, we as a people, you know, I always tell young Hawaiians, you know, your life's not cheap. Your education is not cheap. In 1893, had 40,000 of us left. That's it. 40,000. And we are the remnants of that 40,000 that made it through. Started with 400,000 to 800,000 to 1 million, whatever it was in 1778. And then you think, how much of our kupuna actually made it here? And the travels to get here. You know, our kupuna wasn't that kind of, the one like sleeping late in the morning and was lazy. Or we came from the ones who was on the go. We came from the ones who were high in technology and science and understood what they need to do in regards to new ways of learning. We came from the Eleoas, that's the point I'm trying to say. If you look back at history, yeah, our genetics from mitochondrial DNA, mother's side, yeah, we come from the very first people to walk out of Africa. Don't believe me? You shouldn't believe anything I say anyway, you should find out for yourself. And what's also interesting, the last migration to leave Africa, we also descend from them, who actually came through Southeast Asia, jumped off of Taiwan, and then entered into the Pacific. So our kupuna, you look at it, we're fascinating people. And even while the rest of the world were still living in caves, that's the truth. Our people were sailing across this ocean. So those who were afraid stayed home. But our kupuna, who wanted a new vision of a new world, they moved on, and that's who we descend from. So to me, I would say that's part of our DNA, that's part of our ancestral memory. We don't come from people who are lazy. We don't come from people who are not into technology. We don't come from people who just rather sit back and watch the world go by. We come from the opposite. We come from the movers and shakers. But part of the education or miseducation of us through the years has been to teach us, Hawaiians, all you guys do is drink beer, play ukulele. Put a nice aloha shirt, walk around, and you're Hawaiian. In 1897, they never taught that. Yeah? So, the purpose of so-called conscientism for me is to undo that, but not just to undo that in a reactionary sense, but for us to start the process and program of an ideology to dictate for ourselves where we want to go, how we're going to get there.
Liberation.
Not others defining for us, but we start to define for ourselves. And one of the things I believe also is that, when I look at politics, people get too caught up in the governmental structure thing sometimes. And me, I look at the simple politics of, Andre knows this, one of the things I do every, in the spring break time is we go to the East Maui Tarot Festival. And 10 years ago, when I first used to go, I started by doing pounding point demonstration with John Lynn folks and Tweety Lynn, and I teach some of the kids how to pound. The next year I come, the same kids show up. Me, as a conscious Hawaiian, I know I'm planting seeds in those kids. Because for me, the first time I pounded tarot was as a student here, at this place here. For these kids, it's second nature now. And you look at that example. To me, again, as I said, there's not culture or power. They're one and the same. If I can raise the consciousness of that child, that already is putting him on that path. You know what's that saying? As a man thinketh, so will a man be, or something. So, as we plant those seeds in our kids, and see, that's the thing with the next generation. That's why education to me is such an important element in all of this. The great French philosopher Foucault said, well, paraphrase Foucault anyway, something in effect that, we know what one does, but we don't really know what one does. You guys got that one? Yeah? We know what one does, but we don't really know what one does. That small event or that small gesture and the reaction from that is part of creating that movement in the ball. Let me give an example of that. If you look at the struggle of Kaho'olawe, in the beginning of that struggle, Uncle Charlie Maxwell, who's recently passed away, I got to spend a lot of time and interview him, and I actually had a very fun and loving relationship with Uncle Charlie. And I was able actually to interview one Kaho'olawe, because as the story goes, back in 1974, he was on Kaho'olawe, and there's a picture of him kind of standing on the wall, and he had this idea, I'm going to come back to Kaho'olawe, we're going to play more for the Hawaiians. So in 1975, he was attending a meeting, and he was talking with Kwaipuna Priji, and they had this conversation. And Kwaipuna told Uncle Charlie, hey, we're going to go occupy, we need one. Wounded Knee of our own, so we're going to occupy the Arizona Memorial. And Uncle Charlie said, well, you're crazy, they're going to shoot you Hawaiians, you guys go there. I gave one better idea, we go Kaho'olawe. And that began the Kaho'olawe. And so they decided to go invite different peoples and different groups to go to Kaho'olawe. And of course, we know one of the groups were a bunch of young men from the island of Molokai, who was there also. And the next day, the supposed great flotilla was going to go over, but had blockade and so forth. And most people, everybody turned around except for one boat, the so-called Kaho'olawe 9. Yeah. People like Ian Lind, Walter Riddy, Emmett Aluli, Kimo Aluli, I forget, Steve Moore, anyway, there are 9 of them anyway. And they never turned around, they went. Who knows, by the fact, because they never turned around, what might have been different if they actually had turned around. Think about that. But because they made the commitment to go anyway, the so-called beginning of the so-called illegal occupations of Kaho'olawe, which began the whole beginning of the so-called Aloha Aina movement and the occupations, eventually lead us to where we are today. But if that 9 had not made that commitment on that day, who knows where Kaleikoa in that situation would be today. See, that's the point. So we all know what one does, but not know what one does. Yeah. So what does it tell us? Do something. If you listen, watch. There's nothing. Anybody can watch. But do something. If he now tells you do something, do something. Don't be afraid. The smallest thing will create the next big thing. And so, Andre, question.
Maybe 5 minutes so we go through some questions.
Raja, let me go get some other notes I want to make sure. Now, some of the political stuff about the way I look at and analyze the situations. Understand the oppressor versus the oppressed. The oppressor, the main job of the oppressed, first of all, is to make you believe as the oppressed that your culture and their culture is one and the same. Meaning that your history and their history is one and the same. Because if they can't do that, then you end up believing what is good for them is also good for you, even if it hurts you. And you become complicit again. That's the process of hegemony in that process. Yeah? So you get taught. Oh, I gotta tell this story. Pick up my blue and whites again. I'm sorry. But anyway. 1 year, Kari Makika Whitaker and I actually go off to Washington and invite us to do a talk at I think Walla Walla. I forget the name of the school there. I remember they were the fighting missionaries, that's all. And literally they had one Bible in their hand and a gun in the other hand. And that was the name of the school, the mascot, the fighting missionaries. And I went to do this talk, and back then I always start off my rap by saying, I'll walk out and I go, who discovered Hawaii? Oh, this young guy stand up tall, raise his hand, Captain Cook, 1778! What school did you graduate from? Kamehameha! You are very educated. Point I'm trying to make is that, how can we get a young Hawaiian, obviously highly intelligent, and fail to see that we've been here a long time before Captain Cook and were never discovered by Captain Cook? How can that be? You are taught to believe that. Somehow, as I said, we like the rocks and trees was just waiting to be discovered. Right? That we weren't human. See, that's the thing. We are human, have always been human. We've been around since La'i. Over 1,000 generations back to La'i. We're not Johnny-come-latelys up on this planet. We didn't begin in 1776. We didn't begin with Columbus. But we get taught that. See, that's hegemony. Then you start to see the world and define it that way. Hey, Thanksgiving. Right? You get taught Thanksgiving. I was a little kid. As you know, second, third grade, Thanksgiving, we all dressed up like Indians and pilgrims, run around. First Thanksgiving, march around the school. Of course, little did we know, that's a whole crap in regards to what happened the first Thanksgiving. That's not what occurred. But yet we get taught to celebrate some event that actually never occurred. You guys know, we know their first winter, the so-called All Saints, weren't even called pilgrims back then. They weren't eating pumpkin pie and turkey. What were they eating? Pichara. How about this one? When they first landed on the beach, they came upon a nice sand bluff or hill or puoni. No. First thing they did on their knees, they thanked God. What was the second thing that they did when they came upon that beach? Huh? Dig up bodies. How come? Because they found that they had landed upon an Indian burial site. And God gave them all these treasures to dig up. So the first act that they did was the grave rob. They don't teach us that in school. they create this kind of fantasy of the Indians and the pilgrims. Well, how many of you guys know that when the Indians actually did go and help the first so-called pilgrims to plant and feed themselves, 20 years later, what happened?
Genocide.
The so-called Pequot War, where almost all of the so-called Indians who had helped them to survive were murdered. Men, women, the old, the young, children. And how did they celebrate that murder? They burnt the bodies. And I forget the name, is it John Endicott? One of the persons who writes about it says, and God blessed us with the smell of the burning bodies. That's the pilgrims. That's the false history that gets taught us. Why is that done? To confuse us. To make us somehow believe in some kind of fake event out there to make us domesticated and docile. To somehow believe, wow, these guys are pretty good, these pilgrims. So I'll tell you the truth. If the truth was actually taught, you might look at those guys and realize, man, these guys come from a pretty barbaric people. And the descendants of them are pretty barbaric. See, that's the power of history. Again, that's what went back to Malcolm X's statement. So for me, an important cornerstone of conscientism is understanding history, because it helps to untangle a lot of this, and I always say we are damaged goods. We get, so part of our role here, I guess I'm trying to get is to separate, expose that their culture and our culture is not the same. And so why do I tease the pilgrims? For that purpose. It's to open up. The further we are separate from them culturally, the more politically strong we are. See, that's the point. That's why, if you ever wonder, why did they hate our culture so much? It wasn't that they just never liked how we sounded. Hawaiian, you guys sound funny, so you're going to ban your language. Why did they ban our language in a mean of instruction? Because they wanted to affect our education. You affect our education, you affect our thinking. You affect our thinking, now we can control you a lot easier. Not just control you, but you become willing in that control. And that's why Hawaiian language and immersion education to me is a very key element in this process of reclaiming and regaining our sense of who we are. Because our kids got to understand, not to say they should not understand real estate and property, because that's part of the world language. But they better know Aina first. Because if they don't, in that confusion, we end up serving the interests of those who benefit from the fact that we walk around as zombies. So in a nutshell, Hawaiian conscientiousness for me is the reawakening, getting up from that sleep as zombies, becoming who we should be. I don't know exactly what we should be, I'll be honest. I get ideas, but I know all of us together can put forth ideas. And I also know politically those ideas unified, working together, will make us a lot stronger. And once we start to think independent, see, independence will come. In fact, Andrew knows, one of the things I always say is that I'm not for Hawaiian independence as much as I'm for independent Hawaiians. And I have said this many times. You can give me one passport right now. All of us as Hawaiians, we get our own passport right now. I want you guys to think about that. How are we going to behave? What are we going to do? I'm more afraid of that. I'm not saying I'm afraid of how many but I'm afraid of that. That's all this is about. For me, it's deeper. George Helm said, it's another great thinker, our own. George Helm said, far worse than losing one's land is losing one's culture, one's identity, one's language, one's history, our sense of purpose. That's more dangerous. And how do we become independent thinkers? Well, we have to get educated in our terms, not educated in the reflection of those who are looking to benefit from us. And let me just add to this also. When I look at this situation of Hawaiian conscientism, I know, this gets very tangled because first people ask me, well, what do you mean by Hawaiian? So this is part of our discussion we got to understand also. And I don't believe there's one single definition. Because I don't think our people ever had one single definition. I know it starts with a sense of our mo'okuauhara, our genealogy. But I know in our families we have many different peoples from all different races. We have people who live amongst us from all different places and races also. And maybe today it's an issue for some, not so much for me. Because I know those who live amongst us, their bones are going into the lepo just like mine. And in 20, 30, 40 years from now, 100 years from now, it's not going to be a big issue. Because their children will probably end up with my children. So that's not really the issue. But that understanding of what makes up us so-called Hawaiian, to me that's more important. You know, one of the things I always say is, I care less about you being, I am Hawaiian, as much as being Hawaiian. Don't worry about the noun. Worry about the verb. Because we get trapped. Huh, you Hawaiian, okay. And then we'll look at the verb part, the being Hawaiian part, which to me is more important in the long run. Because again, I don't think about this now. I'm thinking about 100 years from now, 500 years from now. How will the Hawaiian world order come into being? Unless we participate in the world. I guess I want to just get into the Colorado stuff real quick before questions. But one of the things Andre was asking about, and kind of went a while back, and I was just talking to Dr. Warner, and so I can't remember, probably in the mid-90s, and I think I'd written something, or I forget what was going on, but we were talking about this idea of colonization, and again, I'm not using it in that political sense, in a sense of the, but the phenomenon of, again, as I explained earlier, of being controlled, that process. And so, I remember I had actually did a couple of talks with Honi Harawira, who was in Hawaii at that time. And Honi Harawira we had actually gone out and did a couple of talks about this idea. And in our discussions and talking at the panel, he was talking about, this idea of, when the worms, it's like being, the damage that happens in the brain, so it's like worms eating out the sense of who you are. Your brain is full of holes. It's like you really not really who you're supposed to be, so you're not going to think the way you need to think. Yes, of course, Hawaiian worms. The first, of course, Nayo. Yeah, so Nayo, the pinworms. So people are parents, so sometimes the kids get the worm in the okole. That's the Nayo, the pinworm. Or Palanayo, you might have heard that one, of course. So the word Nayo, the worm, and then what do worms do, of course, is to kolo or kolonayo. And so the idea of kolonayo was meant to kind of represent, and I remember, talking to Noiao about that, this image or idea of, worms eating out our brains. And of course, it also sounds like we colonize it, so, kind of fit nicely. And so, that condition or state of being, kolonayo. To cause, of course, that to happen, ho'okolonayo. And we're not using the Hawaiian language word, which is to ho'opanara'au, in fact, is the word that we use in Hawaii. So we're talking something in a different sense. And the opposite of that, hemonayo, which is, no more the nayo inside, or hemo. And then, of course, ho'ohemonayo, to actually take out the nayo. And so that is part of that kind of language that we have used in the past, to kind of explain this mentality. And again, dealing with the mental destruction of our identity and knowledge of self. And so I was speaking with Andre and stuff, there were a couple weeks back, I guess, kind of recalling that history of that word. I know it's a huge discussion, even on campus and talking with other students. And when we look at what's happening today, politically today, and I'm a big believer that we need to look everywhere and listen to all voices, and for our own selves determine what voices are relevant and which are not. But we should never be afraid of any voices.
Because sometimes you hear that kind of talk. People, oh, for example, Kaleikoa, you cannot use that because, we're not colonized officially, Yes, I know that. I know what you're talking about. I understand in the political state theory kind of understanding. Exactly. But I'm talking like what Ngugi is talking. I'm talking what Malcolm X is talking. I'm talking what, like I said, many others and how they describe the idea, which are all different. The idea, of course, when you have the so-called oppressor finding ways to manipulate the so-called oppressed. To me, that's what I'm talking about. As I had said, for me, I don't want to end with just a passport. You Hawaiian national, you get passport, right on, Hawaiian sovereign. Because if we still think and act like the oppressor, think about that. We become oppressors ourselves. We do the same things that is done to us. And I don't know how, and for me, I ain't involved with this for that kind of freedom. The great Elijah Muhammad through Malcolm X, and he always had a great analysis between what he called the field Negro and the house Negro. And that one, and I would read for another time, but you guys should go, you can check them out, internet, Google, the field Negro and the house Negro, the kind of analysis of power, in the so-called slave system. The house Negro was one who actually had worked his way into the power structure of the slave plantation and benefited from the slave plantation, perhaps because they listened the best and performed the best and was most willing to do whatever the master wanted. And many times the house Negro would believe that they actually was better than the field Negro because obviously the master thought they was better and therefore they're better. And so the house Negro would always work for the best interests of the slave master because the interests of the slave master would always benefit him also. While the field Negro, of course, he hated his master. He wanted to burn down the house of his master. He'd find any way to resist against the master. And he would never accept that the master had his best interests at heart. But in that process, we also should be aware that the house Negro many times would work against the so-called field Negro for their own interests. And sometimes for, monetary interests. Sometimes to hold particular positions. And so we understand power in that way. To be, we can start to analyze that and look at what's happening in Hawaii today. What's going on in our communities today. Iali ino kiali ke kanaka. Okay, Andre, question.
So, we went into a little bit over time, but I think we should wrap up. If anybody got, I would like to maybe have a few minutes for questions or comments, so that we get some opportunity
Let's see students first. Students first.
I want to take the mic.
to engage.
At least it can be heard.
So we just want to give priority to students that might have some questions. So who has questions? I'm just going to hand the mic over so everybody can hear your question.
Shout it out. Okay, go. Shay, come out now. Mohana. Yeah, wait.
I don't know, I think kind of late, so you could have said it in the meeting, but like, was there? Oh, sorry. Was there a point like when the light first went on, like when you were thinking about like at any time?
I would say that light went on many times. I think, for me personally, I've always had, I'm a natural rebel by heart, I guess. I always had that kind of like instinct to always challenge. If you tell me something, the first thing I will already be like, no, I don't know. But I do know, like I was sharing earlier, there are many events in my life that I would say the light just kept on going. And that's why I was kind of sharing the story, that I want to make sure that students don't be afraid to participate, or don't be afraid to meet new challenges and get out there in the community. There's so much you can learn out there That's not covered here, believe me. You know, this is just a place to kind of give you a map. But you got to go on the excursion. That's out there in the community. You know, you got to go out there and talk with the people. Talk with the so-called people out there walking the walk. You know, that's where the real lessons of life are out there. But it doesn't mean you go out there and, you know, start telling, you know, I learned this in school and let me tell you what I've learned. You know, and that's part of it. And that's part of my journey is also always getting better to learn to listen. You know, and you got to listen because that's where that exchange is going to happen. But I mean, again, the light to me, I mean, it's at different stages. I mean, you know, every day I get one new light on my. I mean, I'll read anything, watch anything, listen to anything, and at all times, at any places, I can get inspired. I can learn something, and you know, again, kind of my nature in regards to. I never kind of stand one thing here too long. I'm always kind of ADD in thinking or something, but it's just kind of my nature. But you know, if you're passionate about anything, you know, you should understand it to the fullest. I mean, if you're involved with taking care of native plants, if you're involved with farming, or if you're involved with art. I mean, art is also such a powerful instrument in regards to this expression. You know, artists have always led the way in regards to conscious raising. I repeat, artists have always led the way in conscious raising, whether it's physical art or music and so forth, dance and all that. Yeah. So the revival, what I'm trying to say, is open all kinds of avenues in all different ways. You know, it can be expressed itself. You know, and again, that's why I was going to show you about how intelligent our people were. You know, our people believe, as Mama told me, you know, all our people are geniuses. That's the Hawaiian way of thinking. Every child is a genius. Every child is a genius, but we're not all geniuses in the same thing. See, part of education is to figure out what the genius of this child is in. Yeah, so if we approach education that way, we approach each other that way, we start to see, you know, kuleana. Yeah, you cannot have one person dictate to everybody else what's good for everybody else. I remember once when I was in Palisai, I think Manu Meyer was doing a talk once, and she did a talk, and I don't know, this discussion, and actually a fight erupted in the discussion, and I, you know, tried to explain some of the situations. One of the guys raised his hands and he goes, you know, Kaleikoa, I don't see democracy in the Hawaiian voice when you guys get together. I said, well, you're looking from a Haole lens. So in the Haole voice, you all get 5 minutes for talk, right? You all talk 5 minutes, you vote, that's democracy. Hawaiian, very different. We understand certain voices get more kuleana than other voices, right? If we're talking fishing, we're talking about the ocean, we like hear from the fisherman. We don't like hear from the guy who never has fished in his life. So who cares what is 5 minutes? And it's like, you know, so our idea of democracy comes out in a very different way. It's based upon kuleana. Somebody we might hear from them half an hour, another person, okay, 10 seconds, thank you very much, moving on. But usually in the Hawaiian sense, those who know they know more kuleana, they're not going to say nothing. And even how we come to decision making, right? All this time, we all vote, the ayes have it, the nays yo. Hawaiian sense of consensus is very different. We all should have some kind of part in coming to the decision. Now, not to say things can be perfect. Sometimes it takes a long time. But we all know it's not going to be one side win, one side lose. Because that's not how I make. One side win, one side lose. Oh, I don't like play. See, the cohesion and unity is more important. See, that's why institutions like the Office of Hawaiian Affairs will always continuously to struggle. It's not they don't get good people in there. Believe me, I know a lot of real good people in there. But if you get 5 to 4 vote all the time, you know more cohesion, unity. I always say, if I told them once, because they come to decision, go in the room, lock the door, don't come out until you guys all agree on something. Because 5-4 always means when you get 4, they're going to lose. That's not our way. That's a system that's imposed on us. A process of coming to decision that's imposed on us. And we think, oh, we get self-governance, so we're doing things in a Hawaiian way. No. It's set up in a way. Not meant to. Because Hawaiians, we get hurt, right? You know, if I'm the 4 and you're on the 5, you freak, I get you back next time. That's our way. You like that?
I mean, even being honest about, well, for example, I mean, I've said this many times, you know, they're good people. I'm not, the people are good. And I always say, but the institution is wrong. You know, people, oh, but the OHA represents the Hawaiians. Wait, step back now. Let's be clear. Who votes for the OHA trustees? Huh? Everybody. How much percentage of Hawaiians vote for the trustees? A minority. The vast majority that vote for the trustees are not Hawaiians. Could give a shit about our future. So let's just, wow, I can't believe, you know, what they're reading, man. Like that guy, couldn't believe he never came. I'm saying, oh, wake up. He wasn't selected because they don't like one. That you gotta understand the process. Again, I'm not saying right, I'm just trying to understand. We gotta be clear. That is a process that's controlled by the voters of the state of Hawaii. That's always, so they represent the interests of the voters of the state of Hawaii. That's political science fact. You gotta read. They represent the voices and votes of everybody, which are a majority of the Hawaiian voice. But the falsification again of our conscience to believe, oh yeah, they really represent us. Nothing can be further from the truth. So when there's support, for example, and I will drop right down, of course, something like even for the what's that thing called? Signing the email. The Royal Commission. And I was talking to somebody, but Kaleikoa, we gotta unify. I said, yes, we gotta unify. Not us at Abercrombie. The Royal Commission was created by Abercrombie. The state of Hawaii will never implement a process that works against their interests. You don't understand this? That's political science 101. So our unity can never be with Abercrombie. He represents the state of Hawaii, who is the oppressors of our case. Now, if you doubt the state of Hawaii being our oppressor, I mean, all you gotta do is study what's happening on Mauna Kea, what's happening on Kaleikoa, what's happening to our waters, PLDC, you wanna keep on adding to that? But again, if we get this false consciousness of who's speaking for who, we end up buying into somehow that we legitimatize. Now, I'm not saying good things cannot be done there. I mean, please understand. I'm not saying good things cannot be done there. I'm just trying to lay the political fact that this is how and why institutions like the Office of Foreign Affairs are going to hold hands with people like Abercrombie and somehow believe that they going to organize Hawaiian unity by signing your name and maybe give a free t-shirt. As I said, who wants to be part of a nation where you get a free t-shirt? I want to be part of a nation where people come out in the droves to like sign their names. That's the nation I want to be part of. Not the one you gotta, hey, come on, man, sign your name, I'll give you a free t-shirt. To me, that's embarrassing. That's shameful. And I'm a big, and just to put up maybe one of the things I can just drop to Andre, I can mention to other people, I would hope it open to have a debate in public against John Waihee about the value of the Royal Commission. Because the first question they're going to ask is Abercrombie our friend or our foe? And that's the first question. Because the Royal Commission, again, did not generate itself from our people. I'm not against us guys putting our names to a paper. But I wanted to put a paper that we in control of. And the sad thing, there's nothing that's stopping us from working together now anyway. There's nothing that's stopping us from working together anyway except ourselves. But you do have those who believe somehow that they gotta get the so-called oppressive government to say, now you can. And they can only find legitimacy there. And they cannot find legitimacy here. And that's the part, for me, I think I find very disturbing because it's moving. It's going on. It's probably going to happen. And then I would say, whether it happens or not, that's not the question. What we going to do anyway? That's the question. What they going to do anyway? That's the question.
what we gonna say, what we gonna do, what we gonna organize anyway. You know, and one of the things I remember that Kwame Ture had said, going back to the discussion, he said, you know, when they're doing something, yeah, when they're doing something, you know you must be doing something good. Because they wouldn't be doing something unless they were scared of something. So the fact that they get these kinds of, activities going on, that tells us that, you know, it's basically they're trying to find a way to cut in front. They're trying to find a way to prevent the inevitable. And I use the word inevitable because I wouldn't be in this business unless I believed it was inevitable. And remember, like I was studying that question, Kwame Ture said, Kaleikoa! And I got to talk to him personally, you know, it was a big deal. And he actually wrote letters to me. I mean, I get up high in my, some of the important stuff. Handwritten too. But he said, Kaleikoa, what's your fear? And I said, OHA might become the political entity. They're going to become the nation leadership. And he goes, it shall come to pass. I said, what? It shall come to pass. They're going to give you that before they ever give you something real. I kind of, oh my God. But it also told me, it's like, see, I know when that day comes, I know we're getting closer. But as we get closer, it's going to get tougher. And as it gets tougher, it gets more demanding. But the more demanding it gets, that means we're getting stronger and stronger. See, that's the point. So when I look at these things happening, I don't get like all totally worried and freaked out. There's a part of me that goes like, hey, we're moving. The test is going to be how we're going to react, because it's going to happen at some point. But what are we going to do? What are we going to do when that occurs? That's the test. As the water, as Kwame Ture said, the strongest swimmers swim in the roughest seas. When the big waves come, either we're going to swim or we're going to drown. It's that simple. Easy for hang out in a tidal pool and survive. But when the waves come, we better start swimming.
Well, mahalo Kaleikoa. We've kind of running into way over time, but if we have any last minute student questions, anything. If not, because we get brought out Kiao Moku who has a question, and Shoti, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I was just wondering, I think a large tool of the oppressor is to turn oppressed groups against other oppressed groups. I would say in the Hawaii tap would be turning Hawaiians and vice versa against those people coming from the home Micronesia.
Oh yeah.
And I'm just wondering how powerful the role do you think the tool is of displacing anger against the true oppressor? What's that?
That is an excellent point. This is part of the process. In fact, you see it happening now. The oppressor will always have the oppressed fight amongst themselves first. That is part of the strategy, right? The disunity of the oppressed allows them to continue the oppression. But I also understand the history of, for example, if you look at places within the different islands of Micronesia and their situation, what's happening here. And I remember this, Papa Maupi Ailug, I shared it earlier today. It was Papa Maupi Ailug on Kaho'olawe. One of the great days of my life also. And if you guys ever get one chance, there's a video that was done, a 3-hour video. I think the Makali'i gang was with him and stuff. One of the guys anyway. It's kind of not the best quality, but you gotta listen carefully. The things he says is so empowering. Anyway, so I'm at Papa Mau on Kaho'olawe. And he says, one day, all the canoes are gonna come here. And I was like, oh, are you for real? And then I was thinking to myself, wow, that means like, what is Hawaii mean to the rest of the Pacific? You see him already. You see Hawaii as like this. And it also made it clear that, and I say this many times, Hawaii will never be free unless the rest of the Pacific is free. Repeat, Hawaii will never be free unless the rest of the Pacific is also free. So, when you look at other islands, this is part of our strategy to understand our own histories and share and understand the commonalities, because if we allow that division, it doesn't empower us. And that's a very simple way to get people to kind of react in ways which is, self-serving or whatnot. Look what they taken from me, When in reality, we both being taken from. Papa also said this, even deeper. He said,
Micronesia, Melanesia, Pan. No more. Us all island people. We all island people. And I get like, wow, you was talking about the like, wow, yeah. You know, these identities are created, imposed on us by the so-called colonial powers in the 1800s to divide us up into different ways. So we don't see ourselves as same island people. We allow their divisions. Who benefits from that? Not us. But, and then I was thinking, I said, wow, you know, there's something about, hey, you know, you watch the Olympics, you have the Olympic flag. What's missing on the Olympic flag? We get all the circles, eh? What do the circles represent? What about us? She didn't realize, well, even the consciousness, we don't have our own circle on that thing. Because we are the ocean continent. We are people of this continent of the ocean. You know, but we've kind of been thinking that we just islands caught off of Southern California or something. Eh? We just, you know, that we are of ourselves or our people. So when we strive, and you look at what's going on in the world, you know, the different so-called continents are all trying to kind of get together, right? The European Union. So we as the people of the Pacific, if we just standing around and watching, and we don't organize ourselves also, you see, this is part of the process. You know, whether it's economic, whether it's recognition, whether it's culture, social, whatever, we already got to start to imagine. That's my point about once we conceptualize the Pan-Pacific, it shall begin. Yeah, whether, I mean, and you go back to Kaleikoa's time. Yeah, whether we're talking about, you know, seeing ourselves and our brothers in the rest of the Pacific. Because when you think about it, 200 years from now, 500 years from now, what is the Pacific going to be like? Who will our children be with? Is it going to make that much of a difference? Maybe today it does. But I don't think so. And if you look at statistics and how people move in the Pacific, 500 years from now, we're all going to be real chop suey or some kind of chop suey. So, you know.
Okay, mahalo. We want to wrap up. We want to give Brother Ke'o Moku, who's done a lot of work with us in our struggle for independence and give him a chance to ask a question.
Kaleikoa, aloha.
Sir!
My question is, I'm a product of the green and white, not the blue and white. Over here at the university and also at the law school, yeah? And I deal with contradictions with my own colleagues in the law in areas of law, yeah? But what I wanted to ask you is that whether it's time now that we do some introspection, some self-evaluation of the green and white as to what's the shortcoming of the teachings of the green and white. For example, when we teach ourselves or when we accept or we seek accreditation for Native American accreditation, or if we support the APEC as a university, how does that play? How is that some critical evaluation in our own self-evaluation of our self-consciousness? Again, I deal with my law professors and my colleagues on the legal side, still supporting the U.S. Constitution, still supporting case law in Hawaii. So I want you to think about that critically. What we need to do, maybe we need to start picking on the green and white as well.
I totally agree. I mean, my thing is that unless we start asking the questions,
right,
we could be widow.
Right.
So part of even how we use, that's why I say, how we use language here. You know, we should use, I mean, you know, people use occupation, people go, like I said, 20 years ago was like, we never know what that was, occupation, you know, today it's a very different time. And even those who profess on this campus, we need to challenge them in regards to that kind of language. Because that's not the beginning, you see. That all feeds into everything else. But when you're working with the law, so I always know things like the law. The law is a funky world. The law purports to be black and white, but we know it's always been gray. But the good thing about the law is the law changes. But the law will only change when it's confronted politically. It's always been that way. If you go back and just look at U.S. history, for example, yeah, if you look at the constitutional law, yeah, you really study constitutional law, how women were viewed, how blacks were viewed, yeah, 3/5 of a human being. How are Indians counted? Those living human beings. Yeah. And so, I'm not using the U.S. Constitution and American law as a good example, but my point is, it's only in confrontation through political action that possibilities of those kind of things can change. So that's why I big believer that you cannot only knock on that door. In other words, for me, the fight cannot just be just a legal fight, because
You know, I was saying, you know, when I look at the Hawaiian situation, for example, and I watch what's going on in Hawaii, and I'm looking just at the legal situation, and I say, you know, we got to recognize we're dealing with criminals. That's the first thing. What happened in 1893 was criminal. 1898 was criminal. 1990, you want to go down, that's all criminals. And then if you recognize them as criminals, you realize criminals, by their nature, they don't follow laws. So somehow believing that criminals will one day go, yeah, I was wrong and I'm going to follow law, it's not going to happen in of itself.
But I'm not talking about the criminals now. I'm talking about the, protecting
That's
the Haumana who says,
right.
Hey, Kumu, how come we applying for Native American
Right.
accreditation?
No, I totally agree though. But that's my point. That's where the thing that start here. Because if that change is going to occur, yeah, exactly. I totally believe in you. It has to start with questioning those who are making those decisions. And like I said earlier, I'm not saying there's difference between tactics. You see, if it's a tactic for, Skippy always said that, if I can rip off the guy who ripped me off, it's not really ripping off. Yeah, if it's a tactical thing, that's very different from that's really what I want and stuff. And so, but the only way we can get to that point is that, and that's why I tell students, you should always challenge your professors at all times, at all questions. Like I say, if they're real true professors, they shouldn't be intimidated. They shouldn't be afraid. This is a process. We are all every one of us, me too, right in front, we are all in transformation. Nobody has the answer. Nobody knows all the way. We are all in transformation. And if we all recognize that, then we realize, as I said, there's no gods. Nobody's a god here. Nobody get all the answers. If that was the case, we wouldn't be in this situation. But we recognize, like I said, if we understand the criminals for who they are, you also can sit back and realize how they can play the game. And I always use the example of playing, it's like you're playing chess with a criminal. Right? Checkmate, brother. Look at that. I get the law right there, checkmate. So the criminals, they're going to make one extra box in back like that. They're going to switch the guys or something. But they don't follow the rules. That's their nature. So when I understand their nature, I realize that fight is not just that. I got to come with that also in a political way, in a movement way. Another way that's also going to force their hand where they gotta say, check. Yeah, so because I say power concedes. Shucks, I forget already. No, Frederick. I forget. But power concedes nothing to. Anyway, the political power is part of it also. The slave master never give up the slaves because they figured out one day morally it was the right thing to do. The slave master gave up the slave because people had to die and bleed in that process to force them to do what they needed to do. And that's the thing you got to remember. These things don't just occur on moral grounds. Because if it was moral grounds, they wouldn't be doing the things that they do anyway on moral grounds. But if you deal with immoral people, you can expect immoral actions. And the only way to attack that is, again, multiple fronts and multiple ways. And so when I look at the Hawaiian situation, for example, I always say, there is a need to attack on all fronts. And I don't mean attack, just like crazy kupuli kind. But analyze the situation, and maybe when we play our version of chess, we bring in extra pieces or something. I don't know, we figure something out. We come at it in a very open way. Yeah. Konami way and stuff. And this is, to me, part of our analysis. Yeah. We cannot be limited by their game either. They set the rules and we say, yeah, I'm going to follow these rules and we hope for the best. You're already trapping yourself in a situation. As one of these I always say, my father used to say, you bet against the house chicken. The gambler fight chicken. In other words, you're not going to take your best chicken, I go to chicken fight, and I'm going to fight the house's chicken. Because the house chicken, he get the house referee, they're stacking the odds against you. And if you think you're going to get in a fair fight, you already lost the fight. You've been set up in the process. Never. So when we approach this thing, that's why I say, I always have to be our eyes open and we use whatever skills and tools we all get, because all of us say you're different. And I look at somebody like you, what you're doing to me is one of the most important elements, because we gotta deal with them straight up, because this is part of the contradictions that are going to reveal themselves. Now, whether they listen or not, it's up to them. But the contradictions will reveal themselves to the rest of the people. See, my thing is how you take that
And how do we educate the rest of the people with it? That's the key. You know, I've always said this, you know, the Marines in Kanohe, you know, the day we get 10,000 people there, that place is liberated. The question is, how do we get 10,000 of our people there? That's the question. You know, that's the question. That's what this conscientism thing is all about. Because if we can do that, then we know we get political power. But you show up with 12 guys, well, probably not gonna happen.
But there's one thing I can't stand, the American dream. What is that? The land of the home and free. What is that? We work hard for the man, I'm giving it all I can. My pride is what keeps me going, but there's one thing I can't stand, the American dream. What is that? The land of the home and free. What is that?